But I can tell you, oh my goodness, was this text exactly right? We back with another reflection and the final reflection on our overview of the Song of the Lord, the Bhagavad Gita, the most famous poem in the world and the entire philosophy summed up in a 30-minute conversation between this warrior prince and who he thinks is his charioteer, who ends up being symbolic embodiment of God. Pretty cool to be able to take in a conversation between a revered, capable warrior prince, the footsteps of this massive battle, having a conversation with God as he's having an absolute breakdown on what he knows he should do versus what he wants to do, and his inability to move forward. While he's paralyzed in this fear, in the entire Gita, we get to hear Krishna talking sense into Arjuna. Chapter 18 is the capstone to it all. This is where Krishna, he covers what he has covered before, re-emphasizing certain aspects. This chapter called the Yoga of the Liberation through Renunciation. And a key theme here is outlining what renunciation really is. Renunciation is not living as a hermit in a cave. That is a misinterpretation to think that you must be penniless to be a renunciate. In fact, within this philosophy, classically speaking, you can't renounce anything. You can't give anything up. Your possessions, your preferences, you don't give anything up. We take something up, and the lower falls away. It is a massive misinterpretation to think of that person in the caves as, all right, that's a spiritual sadhu, and well, I've got a career as an accountant, so I'm not a renunciate. That has nothing to do with it. It's not what we do, it's what we do it for. You might be called, it actually might be the indulgent individual that is seeking relief from the world that seeks those caves, and it is the person surrendering to a duty-bound existence that becomes the most kick-ass accountant in the office. The true renunciate. We're called to renounce the fruits of our actions. Fruits of our actions within this text, we're told, are not ours. You could sum up the Gita, two major themes that are hit on over and over again. One is, you are not the actor. You are not who you think you are. Arjuna, the warrior prince, is not who he thinks he is. The fruits of your actions are not yours. This battle, the thought of, well, what if I don't get the result I want? Or, oh, I really want this result that I've wanted for 13 years to happen, to take place. That will corrupt your ability to act. You'll have suboptimal action when we think about the fruits of our actions. And the fruits, much like the fruits of a tree, are not for the tree. The fruits of our actions are not ours. As strange as that is to hear, that's what this ancient text, this ancient philosophy, in terms of continuous study, the oldest philosophy in the world, tells us over and over and over again. You could also summarize the Gita with the first and last words, Mama and Dharma, my nature. Mama meaning my, Dharma, nature. This is an exposition on our nature. Our nature. Who we really are. That's what this dialogue is. That's what Krishna is telling Arjuna, who he really is. And as we touched on a few different times, Krishna has to say it over and over and over again. Arjuna has to be paralyzed by fear just to even seek wisdom. And it still barely gets through. And we're all Arjuna. If we're lucky enough to even ask for help, we still need to hear these things over and over and over again. Because to say they are trippy is an understatement of infinite scale. This is completely, diametrically opposed anything else we're told by the world around us. The world does not tell us about our nature. And even this philosophy, which is the lone philosophy in the world that disavows its own authority by saying, this philosophy ain't the truth. The truth is in experience, experiencing who you really are. It's not in a book. It's not in a text. It's not in a verse. And this chapter clarifies what renunciation actually is all about. It is not about giving anything up. It's taking something up. Take up the higher, the lower falls away. When the fruit comes from the flower of the orange tree, of the mango tree, the flower petals fall away. When we take hold in a higher ideal, our lower ideals fall away. But it's not through saying, you know what, I'm going to give up my toys, or I'm going to give up my preference for really fast, shiny cars. The child, the 6-year-old, does not give up their toys. They just take up a big bicycle, a new toy, something shinier, something better, something of higher value to them. Similarly, we don't give anything up. You don't give up your possessions. And possessions in themselves, according to this philosophy, are completely fine. You can have possessions, just don't be possessed by them. You can have preferences, but don't be governed by them. Can you transcend those preferences? Can you transcend those possessions where, whether they're here or gone tomorrow, it would not affect you? That is the approach that we're called to cultivate. And we do that by taking up the higher, orienting to an ideal that's higher than eye level, and whatever attracts our attention at eye level today will fall away. This chapter is also about surrender. In fact, that line that I used a few minutes ago, surrender to a duty-bound existence. This comes from verse 66 of chapter 18, my favorite verse, perhaps in the entirety of the Gita, where Krishna says, relinquishing fully all dharmas, natures, take refuge in me alone, the divine, in God alone. Not Krishna as the form, but capital M, me, the divine, speaking through whatever form in that generation it might take. Relinquishing fully all natures, take refuge in me alone. I will liberate you from all agitation, from all sins, from all agitations. Grieve not. Surrender to our duty. Dharma can also be translated as duty. Surrender to a duty-bound existence. And all agitations cease. In other words, surrender to a duty-bound existence and immediate peace will follow. I've seen this happen in my own life a handful of times. Most recently, about 1.5 years ago, and as Joseph Campbell, the known Vedantic, famously said, the treasure you seek is in the cave you least want to enter. This is the last thing any of us want to hear. We want to hear that the treasure we seek is in the cave we're already in, the cave that we want to enter, the cave that we're about to enter, the cave that we're already planning to enter. And yet, Joseph Campbell, channeling this philosophy, says, no, it's in the cave you actually least want to enter. The cave you have the most fear in entering. That's why fearlessness is one of the divine qualities. Because the treasure you seek is in the cave you least want to enter. The treasure we seek is diametrically opposed to where we want to go or what we want to do. And what is diametrically opposed to our desires? It is our duties. And 1.5 years ago, I was like, man, for 5 years I've heard this call and I've been putting it off. It's the cave I least want to enter. Finally, I was reading through this a few blocks from here, reading through chapter 18 for the umpteenth time, and I get to this verse. Surrendering to a duty-bound existence sounds miserable, but thankfully, the Supreme follows it up. This philosophy follows it up by saying, immediate peace will follow. Grieve not. When you enter the cave, just by entering it, the cave you least want to enter, instantly, peace will follow. It's not enter a cave and then it's going to be the 7-year journey of slaying a dragon that is going to be painful and rip you to shreds, and you're going to be just a shadow of yourself during it, but eventually it'll be worth it. Thank God this philosophy has this addendum to surrender to a duty-bound existence, because it's the most entrancing thing that I could think of. Immediate peace. Show me where that immediate peace is. All right, if you tell me that's the cave I least want to enter, doing the thing that for 5 years I know I need to do, but I've been putting it off. If that doesn't give you the courage, the conviction to do it, I don't know what will. And I'll tell you more than just what this text says, that you'll be liberated from all agitations. More than what this text says, immediate peace will follow. I can tell you, within 45 minutes of saying yes to this adventure of sorts that I had been called to for 5 years. You see, I'd built a company, spent a better part of a decade building a company, from my bedroom to then Austin, Texas, then to Palo Alto, then San Francisco. And it was such a painful kick to the brain every day. As Elon Musk says, entrepreneurship is staring into the abyss while chewing glass. That's what it felt like for the better part of a decade. Chewing glass. And it was so painful. It's like, I'm never doing this ever again. And yet I had gained a PhD in starting businesses. PhD in myself. A PhD in life, it felt like, because that situation was so intense, which led to just an insanely intense failure. And none of our dreams coming true in a very public way. I was just reeling for like 15, 16 months after. Kind of just a shell of myself. I needed to sleep 2 hours every afternoon because I was so burnt out for 8, 9 months afterwards. And I was like, I'm never doing that ever, ever, ever again. I don't care if I got a PhD in this experience. I am never going to use that PhD to start another business. And I'm saying that metaphorically. There are no PhDs in business. But this voice kept coming back over and over and over again. That there needed to be a product. There should be a better way in which we choose the work that we do in 10 seconds. There should be a 5 to 10 minute application that we all use. That one quiz gives us all personality test results back, all aptitude test results back to tell us our preferences, our skill sets, and what we're naturally wired to do from the comfort and convenience of our phone. That then maps to all of the job openings in that field, as well as all the resources online to get you proficient in whatever field you are wired for within 90 days. So that was the idea. I thought about it at the Heathrow Airport when I had a 4-hour flight delay. For 5 years, I was like, that should exist. I even had a name for it. For 5 years, I was like, no, I ain't doing that. Building software companies is so painful. I cannot imagine, even if it's successful 10 years in, because my last company, we had barely through the skin of our teeth sold to Airbnb. I had seen a company 12 years in, still just grinding and grinding and grinding. I sat right next to the CEO, Brian Chesky, phenomenal CEO, by the way. Sat right next to him, shoulder to shoulder. And every day I saw how drained he was 12 years in, building the most successful startup on the planet of the last decade. I was like, if that's what success looks like, F that. And yet, reading this text over and over and over again, knowing that I'd already done decently financially as an investor, as a founder of Magic Mind before starting this next company, I was like, I don't need to do that. It's the last thing I want to do. Enough is as good as a feast, and we've got enough. There's no way I'm going to start another company. And then, like I said, I get to the 18th chapter. I get to this verse. In 5 years of knowing, okay, the treasure, the peace that I'm really seeking is in the cave I least want to enter. Surrendering to a duty-bound existence is where that peace resides. I was like, all right, fine, F it. It's the only place this peace exists, in the cave I least want to enter. All right, we're doing this. And what I thought was going to send shudders down my spine, within 45 minutes, chatting with two friends about this idea, I was like, oh my God. I didn't even realize how much agitation, how much pain and suffering I was just storing around me by not entering this cave. Whatever that cave is for you, it might be 5 years from hearing this today, from getting a brief 30,000 foot overview of this thing called the Gita before you heed the call, before you say yes to that adventure, before you say yes to entering that cave. It might be 5 years, it might be 10. I know it was a long time for me to quote unquote know it, but to not live it. But I can tell you, oh my goodness, was this text exactly right? When we surrender to that duty-bound existence, like I said, it's not 5 years down the road, 3 years down the road. It's not after some big, epic battle that you find peace. Immediate peace follows. There's only one way to find out if I'm telling the truth or if I'm full of shit. But I can say, this is what the sages, the lighthouses throughout history have said over and over and over again. Relinquishing fully all natures. Take refuge in God alone. God will liberate you from all sins. So grieve not. Anyone that has a solution to the problem no longer has a problem. And according to this text, according to these 18 chapters, none of us have any problems. It's just our attachments and our misperceptions that make us think we do. It's the good news. It's the great news. It's the best news. And that is today's reflection on the daily Vedantic. I'll include the link for people to buy the actual copy of the Gita that gives, obviously, much more in-depth perspective on the world's most famous poem. And it has been a blast to go through each chapter in this series on the Gita. We'll probably do this again with series on other texts within the philosophy of Vedanta on the daily Vedantic. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.